We have now launched the online Shockwave course. When I set the company up, which is over 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe, I was always about educating the clinicians as well, not just in terms of the technology. So when Dom Smith came to me with this idea of doing the Shockwave course, I was all for it. And Dom and Katie have done a fantastic job of putting it together. It's really impressive, really comprehensive. It is technology agnostic, so whatever system you're using will be able to help you with this. So it's a brilliant piece of work. The guys have done really well. So check it out and go to the link below and let us know what you think.
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by James Calder, who is consultant in orthopedic surgery at Fortius Clinic in London. He's also Professor of Bioengineering at the Imperial College, also in London. James, how are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Thanks a lot for inviting me along.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. I saw you speaking in London at the SMUG event recently, so it's great to have you on. I've watched your career in the 18 years I've been in the industry, so it genuinely is a real honor and privilege to have you on. So thank you for giving up your time and sharing your story.
Not at all. Very, very pleased to help. This my conference went well, actually. It's a great venue.
Yeah, no, it really was. I think always whenever it's in a football stadium, it's just got something about it, hasn't it? Seeing the pitch, it's got a grand scale about it.
Absolutely. I'm not necessarily an Arsenal supporter. I'll put it out that way. I'm a Norwich City, so we're literally not in the same league. But there we go. Well, maybe one day.
Yeah. How are Norwich? How have they started the season then?
Okay, but there's we're never going to get the same amount of money. So I hope we'll just keep on bobbling along in and out of the Premier League, and we'll see how we get on. But we need a bit more money if there's anyone listening.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Norwich really are like that yo-yo team. Like we've had Ben Godfrey from your own Everton fan, Maddison. You produced some really good players.
Yeah, I know, and I think I think that if they could have a better better sort of a strategy going into sort of bringing the younger players on, and then not have to sell them quickly. That'd be great. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a struggle, but the tractor drivers did it there okay this year.
Yeah, no, yeah, that'll be yeah. It's probably not great for you. It's actually Ipswich doing quite well. Anyway, we'll leave that one there. So I'm really intrigued to hear about how you've ended up doing what you're doing. Like if you're checking out your bio, you've done a lot. So how did you get involved in this? Like, where are you from originally?
Well, yeah, well, I was born in Norwich, so that accounts for quite a lot of my issues. But then grew up, I suppose. Yeah, Dad was an academic and he was a doctor, and then did medicine. I was sort of playing with the idea of going in the army and doing that, but I was lucky. I got into to study medicine and went off and did that. But I knew I wanted to do sports because I always loved to have been an athlete, but I was never going to be good enough. So, going down the route of orthopedics and then sports orthopedics was the next best thing. And really, the training program that I did in the old days, if you like, was very generalist. We did a lot of general surgery, vascular surgery, cardiac surgery, and everything like this. And I enjoyed all that, which is probably what happened for sort of doing some humanitarian work was useful for that. But then getting into orthopedics, working abroad in Australia, where obviously they were probably a little ahead of the game then. When I was training in orthopedics, to sort of understand how important sports medicine is and how important it is to liaise with the physiotherapists, and then coming out the other side. And I realized that when I became a consultant, I had really had no background in sports rehab. And it's one of my bugbears. You may have heard me speak about it at the SMUG conference, saying one of the poor things that we have as orthopedics in training is we're never taught about rehab. And I think it's something we must improve upon, because the first thing you do after the operation is you chat to the physiotherapist, and the physio, unless they're with a Premier League club, if they've just come out of physio university, they'll ask, how do you want this rehabbed? And you sort of have this moment when you go, well, rehab it in the usual way sort of moment. So that's why I then did a rehab fellowship over in the States and went off to the States to understand. So I don't understand it necessarily, but at least I can sort of speak the same language. And I think that's really important. It's something we really need to introduce to orthopedic training. So effectively, I got there's a lot of people supported me, and there is luck. People say you make your own luck, but there's a lot of luck in getting into sports and having the right opportunity and then taking advantage of that opportunity, but then having somebody who believes in you. So we've had some really great people have turned around and said, well, okay, can you do this? And we did some research and worked with Nick Van Dyke, who's obviously, he was professor of AMC, and he backed me, and we've worked together. And today we've got a really good sort of set of I think probably world leading sports orthopedic surgeons, from the States, Europe, the Far East, Australia, and we all sort of get on well and support each other, without having too much sort of conflict and being too much against each other. We've all been sort of very partisan about it and approaching it, and that's been really important. The support we've had from colleagues, it's been great fun.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, just delving into some of the things that you mentioned there, like from the start then. So what was it about medicine that made you want to go into that? Like, what did you have a thought process about what you wanted to end up doing?
No, I think undoubtedly having family back in medicine and was a big factor, and so at least I understood what I was letting myself in for. And people knew it was going to be hard work, and I knew it was going to be hard work. I'm not necessarily the brightest kid on the block, and that's no way would I ever get into do medicine nowadays. But certainly it was an introduction from home and friends, and then spending 5 or 6 years at medical school was quite good fun as a student. That was good fun. And then as far as doing orthopedics, no, I was probably a little later to that. I really enjoyed other things within medicine, sort of toyed with the idea of doing tropical medicine. Didn't really want to go into the army as a medic. I was more sort of infantry based with my sort of exploits there. But I think eventually, having done lots and lots of different surgery, I very nearly ended up doing cardiac surgery, which I found fascinating. It was really hard work. I worked for the most amazing guy, Professor Sir Magdi Yaqub, who was absolutely incredible, and a real character, and led all sorts of different scientific articles, and he really pushed me into the science behind things as well. And then thankfully I stopped doing cardiac medicine after cardiac surgery, after I went on holiday, and realized that actually there's some quite good holidays you can get, and most of the cardiac surgeons didn't really go on holidays as far as I could tell. And certainly when I said I'm going to take 6 months out to go sailing up the east coast of America, he looked at absolute abject horror and said, you can't do that if you can do cardiac surgery. Well, actually, there's a bit more to life than just the cardiac surgery. So I changed tack and ended up doing orthopedics. And I think my wife now says that, if I carried on doing cardiac, she probably would never have married me, because she looked at some of the people I was working with, and they were more impossible than I was. So
Was she thankful that you had, or that you hadn't?
No, she's thankful I stopped doing cardiac and I ended up doing orthopedics, which was that's a close second to personality disorders. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I'm interested what you said there about that you wouldn't get into doing medicine now. Like, why don't you think you would be able to get onto medicine now?
Well, the A levels are required. It is 3, 4 A stars, and you've got to have absolutely everything top. And I'm not sure that you need to have a certain level of intelligence and so bright, but actually there's a lot more to studying medicine and physiotherapy and other top other professions than just the A level results. And I think there's a certain level of evidence, a level of academia you require, but then above that you then need interpersonal skills. You need you need to be interested and interesting, so you can relate to your patients, relate to the other business partners. And it does concern me that we may be having the only tool we've got is to really select on 3, 4 A stars, and actually the interview process is really important. And perhaps the postgraduate medical entry system is a way forwards, because you've filtered out those who actually really have a passion to study medicine with all its pitfalls and all its other problems, but they've already gone through the sieve, if you like, for 3 or 4 years doing another course. It does make it a very long training program, I get, but certainly when I was interviewing for Imperial College, we were interviewing the postgraduate medical entry. You got some really interesting candidates and really interesting, dedicated people. And fine, if we just go on academia, we're going to get some brilliant geneticists and the world leaders in professor of immunology, perhaps, and things like this. But what we need are very good doctors who are going to be able to treat the patients on a face-to-face. GPs is a sort of having a recruitment crisis at the moment, and I think there has to be maybe a slight change in in our selection process to try and get great people along who are going to make great doctors, but they may not have the Einstein brains, and certainly I have not got one of those, but I've done all right.
Yeah, well, no, I think it's really interesting. It's the same with physio, really. That's again, it's an academic course, and they're really speaking to a lot of people. So I agree. I think it's across the board in a lot of medical roles, and that's one of the reasons why I like having these conversations is to find a bit more about the person rather than it just being purely on academia, because it's a very important part, but the connection and personal interaction is pivotal as well. So just in terms of for yours, like when you said you did that, what were you doing up and down the coast then in that 6-month period?
Well, I didn't in the end. I went sailing for about a month, but then the prof found me a job. He said he found me a job, and I went, oh dear. And he said, but it's working in Mauritius, and I went, oh okay, I can cope with that. So he sent me off to Mauritius. There was nobody working in ITU at the time, so it was there's one cardiac surgeon and me in intensive care. So I was an SHO at the time, so I was looking after ITU and then had to do some cardiac operations by myself. So it was a good learning curve. It's not something you wouldn't get away with nowadays, and quite rightly, I think, certainly you wouldn't get away with it in the UK, but there was a need, and that was good fun. Made me stand on my own 2 feet, and we sort of then I came back and realised that actually I want to do other things, so I did a lot of general surgery, vascular surgery, and then ended up going into orthopedics because, the orthopedics is fun. By and large, the patients want to get better. They've got an acute illness, if you like, but it's not frequently life-threatening. I'm a bit of a coward when it comes to many things, but dealing with cancer a lot and in the general surgery and a lot of, in cardiac surgery, if 1 in 5 people or 1 in 5 people have a significant complication and maybe 5% mortality rate. That's you've got to be pretty thick-skinned and pretty tough. And I don't think I fit in that sort of character. Whereas in orthopedics, then you've got people who are, either got arthritis and you put a replacement in, or the road traffic accident, you fix them, sports injuries, you fix them, and they're well motivated to get better, and by and large, they get better. And it's it's being selfish. It's a very rewarding or self-rewarding thing to do, and I loved it. And there's also a great kit, and it's an expanding field of expertise. There's so much more that we can do now, 20 years later, 23 years later, after I've become a consultant, than we could do that time ago. And so at the beginning of the century, the implants have got better. What we can do for sports injuries, we understand the sports injuries so much more. We understand why it's occurred and how we prevent it. We understand the rehab a lot more. Things I've learned off people like you, Andy. Actually, we shouldn't push them on. We shouldn't aim to get them back in 3-4 months. Actually, this will take as long as nature's going to take it, which is maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months. But actually having a good look at the patient, and something we didn't understand 20 years ago. So it's expanding and it's continuing. And with the other stuff, with the bioengineering, we hope that maybe we can manipulate the cell structures and things like this, and manipulate the healing potential we've got an operation which may help 80%, get people 80% of the way. Well, actually, can you nudge it up to 90%, 95% with new technologies coming in?
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. It's great to hear like you're still so passionate about it, and you can see the developments of things. Like, how do you see the next 23 years going of where we're at with things?
Well, I'm not sure I'll be there operating in 23 years' time. I hope for my patients are probably not. But I think a lot more is going to come from the cell biology side of things. We're seeing a lot within the cancer therapy. All the time. There's been some recent stuff about the immune response and the CAR T therapy and things like this, and that is really exciting. There's been a huge drive for stem cell technology, and you may have heard me speak in the past, I've sort of got some cynicism in some respects for some of the drive that's being performed for stem cells, because it's possibly in the wrong direction. Some of it's for money, some of it's placebo, and some of it's just frank sort of bucket scientists. So, but I think we've got an opportunity where we can actually look at this very carefully and delineate which individuals can benefit, the types of injuries that may benefit, and the types of cells and things like this. So I think there's an opportunity to make a big difference there. The implants have got better, right along the line. I think that our indications for surgery have changed a lot, but I think probably in the next 23 years or so, it's going to have to come down to understanding the cellular molecular mechanisms. Some of it for injury. We know, you can see a guy who's had a knee meniscal tear, may not need an operation, but some of them just have a massive effusion and they get catastrophic changes to the articular cartilage fairly quickly. Other people, they react a bit, have a bit of an inflammation, but actually they go on and they don't need a meniscal operation. Some people don't need an ACL reconstruction, and it's understanding that individual response to injury and whether we can then interfere with that, manipulate that. That is a really exciting area to look at.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's going to be really interesting with all the data that's getting gathered now and seeing the impact of being able to track things. And I'm just interested as well as that when you came through then, so how big was the private sector when you were doing that? Or like how, because I've seen a massive shift in the 18 years that I've been involved in it, where I was predominantly NHS, 80% of our work, and it's completely shifted the other way, even more so in the since COVID, really, I would say as well. So from your perspective, like how much private work was there then?
Well, as a registrar coming through, you saw a little bit in some of the London teaching hospitals, but and outside, but you never really got involved in it. You're never taught about it. And I think there's another failing of the system in that it's almost like a dirty word. It's that he's doing some private down the road. Well, hang on a minute. There is a need there, and actually, as I'm now at Fortius Clinic, and everyone knows there's a private clinic. Although we do quite a lot of work for some charities and things, which is offline and it's not charged, but it's very much sort of a them and us. And actually, I think it's symbiotic, and I think there is a need to actually embrace it and take it on and actually teach people how to integrate their private and NHS work. Now, some areas there may not be much private work. So, where you are, there's a big metropolitan district where there's going to be private work and there's going to be a lot of it. Well, actually, if people are seeking that out, that's going to take off the pressure from the NHS, which is broken, for want of a better word. And I think Wes Streeting used that as well. So, it is broken. Well, why say it's, I think you need to embrace it. And for those that can afford it, because there's going to have to be a fundamental shift in our approach to healthcare anyway. And either people are going to have to start paying a lot more, but pumped more money into the NHS, and there's not been necessarily that reward we've got from the money we've put in, or we need to have a sea change and a philosophical change and say, actually, encourage those who've got private health insurance in some way. Either I think in Australia they have a tax disadvantage system. So if you earn over a certain amount, if you don't take out private health insurance, you're tax disadvantaged as a result of it. So actually force people to take out private health insurance, so then they take off their burden of care from the NHS and leave the NHS to pick up those who genuinely really need it and can't afford healthcare. Maybe for trauma and for cancer care and things like that. That's very separate, because it's probably easier in some respects doing that within the NHS, and there's the big organisations, the multi teams. It can be done in private, but it's probably a little bit more complex than that. So I think over the last 20 years that I've been a consultant, there has been perhaps an acceptance of the private sector. But having said that, although I did give up, some people know for very good reasons, my full-time private, my full-time NHS, and went private. Although doing my research at the same time, I still feel guilty about not doing my full NHS sessions, and I can't get over that. But it is, even I feel that, and it's hypocritical. But it's the way I feel, and I probably will go back doing some NHS again at some point, but not this year because we're busy doing other stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point. I really like what you're talking about with the private medical insurance. I think there does need to be something done with that as well. But I think just in terms of skill set for clinicians being taught how to manage it, like we work with many different clinics, whether it's in sports med or physio or whatever, and understanding general business principles and building a team, balance sheets, finances, all of those things, none of that really is taught in those areas. So like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're never taught about it. So I had to learn that as I was introduced to private practice. And when I was first appointed, I was appointed down in Basingstoke. So I left London because we decided we want to be out of London. So I went down to Basingstoke in Hampshire hospitals and worked there. And the guys there and ladies there were really helpful in helping me say, actually, look, if you're going to live in an expensive area of England, you're going to have to you probably have to do some private practice to be able to afford the way that you want to live. So they were very upfront about it, and they said this is the sort of the stuff you need to know about how you set up a practice and stuff. It's something I'd never been taught before, and it's a little uncomfortable first of all, but you worked on it, and that was a very good introduction. But you're right, we're not taught about it generally speaking, and I think there needs to be. It's probably helpful to have a change of philosophy and actually just be honest with people, because I think we need to be honest with what we can achieve in the NHS in the future, and we need to embrace the private sector probably a little bit more honestly about it, how we go about it in the future.
Yeah, no, fully agree. So go back to you and your career then. So when you said you did move into that private sector, like what prompted that?
Well, we were busy. I'd moved back to London again. I was down in Basingstoke for about 5 years, which is a great place, really great orthopedic district general hospital with a great orthopedic department. But I got offered it. I still was doing some work in the academia at Imperial College, and then I got offered a job at Chelsea and Westminster, which was basically I couldn't turn it down. It was an absolutely ideal job, foot and ankle, with an interest in sports, and to help build that up. And so we were building that up, and doing the Imperial College, getting the bioengineering side set up there. And also Fortius was coming on, and that was expanding rapidly from sort of the 4 of us that sort of set it up originally to 12 and then up to a lot more. And that was sort of accelerating. So there's sort of 3 strands. And then my wife unfortunately developed leukemia. And so that sort of put a bit of a change in perspective on life with the kids and all the rest of the stuff and trying to run bits and pieces. And we kept it up for a while, but in the end, which you got again being frank about it, and lots of my friends know about this, but it's not that's a pretty horrible disease to get, and she was in hospital, and actually amazingly, I mean, she survived from a stem cell transplant. And a big shout out there to Anthony Nolan, who were the charity that founded the stem cells, and she had a transplant which was brilliant, and much against odds. I think she got a less than 10% 5-year survival at one point. So things weren't that easy, and I had to give something up. Well, I wasn't going to go at Fortius because that was accelerating away. It's my interest as well, sports. We just got the bioengineering bits going, and I could sort of dip in and dip out of that. So embarrassingly, I gave up the NHS at that point. I still do some. I still got an honorary contract in hospitals. I still go back and do some work for free because it sort of helps my conscience a little bit, and I still look after a couple of regiments in the army free of charge, which sort of get them through when they have their injuries, and get the veterans through, which also helps my conscience. Hasn't quite cleared it yet, but we're still working on that bit. And like I said, and I hope one day I'll be able to get back into the NHS as well, and do a bit more. My colleagues at Fortius may just put their head in their hands if I say I'm going to do that, but I think I enjoyed Chelsea Westminster was a great place to work, great colleagues, great department, good hospital, and I miss that. I warn people, if they think that just going off to do private practice is a good thing. It's not necessarily a great thing to do wholly. I think it does keep you fairly steady. It keeps you grounded working in the NHS. I can say that having left, of course, but I still miss it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, so Fortius then. So how did that come about then?
That was with obviously Andy Williams, who you know very well, myself, and Jonathan Lavelle, who's at Chelsea and Westminster, Andy Davis, who's Guys and Tommies, and Jonathan Webb, and we sort of realised that we should be able to do things better, because the hospitals where we worked were run by the big organisations, and I remember looking out in the waiting room one day, and I'd got two footballers who we knew didn't like each other. They were on different teams, and they both collided at the weekend before, and they were both got their leg in plaster, sitting out in the waiting room, and the only two seats in this room were next door to each other, and there were kids. It was a paediatric clinic going on at the same time in this private hospital, and they were sitting there with a paper, sort of between each other, so they couldn't see each other because they hated each other that much. And I thought, well, this is absolutely rubbish. And I wish I'd got a phone at the time, because taking a picture on the back page of the photo of the paper was of each of them holding it was a picture of them colliding with each other, breaking each other's leg. And it's just, just the irony of it. And so we just sat there and went, there's got to be a better way we can do this, where we can actually have control over where we work. We have a sort of so we can get the MRI scans instantaneously. We can work it up in advance, and we have a little bit more control over our staff. So we have the nursing staff on the ward who have got very much an interest in built with it, and we've got sort of an easier pathway and a bespoke pathway. So it was a bit of work trying to find the property. We looked around all over the place. We very nearly made some very big mistakes taking over places on the A4 towards Heathrow, and which would have been an absolute disaster. And then a chap called Jim McAvoy came on board, who was brilliant and was our CEO. And really, we got a group of us, put some money in, put our money where our mouth is, and borrowed a lot of money off the bank, and which was a rather frightening overdraft or mortgage to get to buy a building, which was, looking back at it, was great, because the building prices have obviously gone up since then, so we actually were okay. But it was a bit scary for a bit, and I had our own MRI scanner put in, and then eventually things evolved. So we got another clinic in the city, and we got other people joining us. And so we've maybe got 30 surgeons working with us and sports physicians. We purposely didn't have physiotherapists with us, because actually people are much better off going back to their own physiotherapist for their own for physiotherapy, or the clubs, professional clubs, obviously go back to the clubs. So it evolved, and we borrowed a lot of money off friends, wealthy friends of Fortius, who lent us some money to buy the first surgical centre, which was a massive step. So we could actually then have our own. We had 3 theatres and with a ward, and so we could do day case and overnight stay, and it worked. It eventually worked well. There was a lot of hard work and sweaty moments early on, and it's not perfect. It never is, but I think we've done our best. There are things I would definitely do different if we were starting again. We learned a lot along the way, but I think the best thing we did was the people we recruited were some very good people. So some people wanted to join us who, if you look at it from a business point of view, and this is for anybody who's thinking about setting up a similar sort of business, it would have made absolute sense to bring them in, because they'd have made the business a huge amount of money, because they got a massive turnover and things like this. But they'd have been very difficult people to manage to work with, and some of them perhaps may not have been sort of perhaps the people we would have liked to work with professionally, or go out for a meal with. And by and large, we recruited people who were sort of like-minded, and the strapline is pursuit of excellence. And I think that's got to be it, because the money will follow. Forget about trying to make money. So anyone who's doing it, just if you go for pursuit of excellence, the money will follow, and the patients will look for that excellent service. And I think that's for any business outside medicine as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Sometimes it is challenging because you're thinking, actually, no, God, I'm just, in your case, you're building a surgical suite, you're buying an MRI, you're buying buildings. It's you need money as well. So it's good, but it is having that core belief, core values. It is critical for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there were some sweaty moments, like I said, and it's never a straight. You think you're going to make these objective, the headline figure or the bottom line figure that you want to make. Oh yeah, well we should be able to make that by December. Come April, it's still not there. You think, okay, and just hold your nerve. As long as it's moving in the right direction, eventually it'll lift off. And we did. It was lucky. I think perhaps we're in at the right time. But I think Jim McAvoy, he was superb, and Nicola, who's there still, trying to manage 30. Well, trying to manage 3 or 4 doctors is bad enough, but trying to manage 30 or 40 orthopedic surgeons, you'd have a hairline like mine.
So, like, what did those people bring then? Are they clinical, or were they there just purely just like running the business?
Jim and Nicola were purely clinical, and the other clerical staff, and it's people, everybody down to the cleaners. The fact that the cleaners would come in, they would actually plump the cushions and they'd sit there looking at an old lady sitting in the waiting room. Oh, would you like a cup of coffee? Can you? It's the whole. It was the whole ethos in that respect that was really important to get that, and to make them feel involved and proud of the business. We didn't get it right in every sense, but there was a certain. It was fun in the end. But also, yes, the clinicians as well. We did need to make sure we got the right clinicians on board and actually have a proper team, because in the NHS at the Chelsea and Westminster, we had a great team. We had a very selected group of individuals who we all got on well with each other by and large, and the similar ethos was at Fortius.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see what's happened with it, and the acquisitions and so on. It's really is impressive. So well done with that, because it's a stressful thing, isn't it, running a business and buying a building? That's definitely a bold step.
Yeah, it was. But we don't own it anymore, so I'm out of that now. So it's but we're still moving on. We're still trying to make sure we get the legacy as well, to make sure that we can actually pursue the elite and bespoke sports injuries centre within Europe. We've got I think we've got a pretty good foothold for referral within Europe, and some patients come across from the States, which is it's reassuring. But I think also, when we're talking about it's not just about I keep on going on about saying it's not just about the money. Another part of it was to make sure we could do research and training. So for research, we've had several hundred papers published from Fortius, from various different clinicians. We've had a research and education foundation, which is a charity that's funded research to in various different areas, and we've also got the fellows, the fellows that come through who are funded, and we've got an international fellowship training scheme. So it's actually was the first private facility recognised by the Royal College of Surgeons in England for training, because there's obviously, understandably, a very hang on a minute, if you're only doing private practice, how can you learn when you're in private practice? Well, actually, you're not going to get much training in elite athletes and orthopedics and elite athletes in the NHS, because they tend not to go to the NHS. But actually working with myself or Andy or one of the other team, that's an ideal situation where they get to one-to-one training, and the Royal College of Surgeons recognise that, when actually they're in with you every single operation one-to-one, every single clinic one-to-one. They have to do research. It's one of the requirements. They have to go down to Imperial College. They spend a half day or 1 day a week, and they have to publish. The ideal is to publish 2 papers whilst they're doing their fellowship. And we've trained going through the foot and ankle. We've had more than 30 orthopedic surgeons from across the world through now, and they're still publishing. Mai, who's in Japan, has just published another paper for the ballet, on some funding stream we got through for ballet, for the Royal Ballet, Birmingham Royal Ballet, and English National Ballet, in conjunction with those those organisations. So that's really important, and I think we're ideally placed to that. And I think that hopefully other places, as you develop in private practice, they can do the same.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you can see it's really forward thinking, like you guys are, cutting edge, and you've got a bit more autonomy to be able to deal with it. I just out of interest, like, how did you end up with the foot and ankle as well? Like, how did that end up being your specialism?
Well, I think 25% of all sports injuries are foot and ankle. So there's a lot out there. And 20 years ago, or certainly 25 years ago, no one really understood what was going on in foot and ankle. And there hadn't been a whole lot of research. There's a little bit out there, but no one had really pushed the sports side of things at all. And you're going nuts for me saying, but the ACL double bundle, all the rest of the stuff that was being, it was every single conference you go to, they talk about the same thing time and time again. And so I thought, well, actually, you can carve a niche in something else in some other area. And I wasn't sure about shoulders at all. Whereas foot and ankle, well, actually, there's an awful lot of injuries out there. No one really understands the basic science. So there's a lot of bioengineering. There's a lot of the anatomy that has been had been needed to be reinvented and understood. And then fixation devices for the ankle injuries and the rehab. So there's like a clean sheet. So that's why I went to Australia and worked for a foot and ankle surgeon down there. Worked in the UK for a bit, then went to Australia, then went to the States and did a traveling fellowship over there, and really then sort of carved a niche, if you like. And when I started as a consultant, I was doing spines and lower leg as well, so hip replacements, knee replacements, ACLs. But foot and ankle took off, and suddenly realised everything comes out from the woodwork, and everyone says, well, look, I don't want to deal with it. So they pass it out to you, and you end up with a big, a fairly big waiting list. And there are plenty of other people who are much, much better at doing knees and ACLs than I ever was going to be. You've got Andy Williams, who's doing, I don't know, 6-8 ACLs a week, and I was doing 1 or 2. Well, I'm never going to be that great at it, and he was much better at it. And so I stopped doing ACLs fairly rapidly, and then concentrated on foot and ankle. And so probably within 2 years, other than trauma, I was purely doing foot and ankle in the NHS. And privately, I stopped doing anything other than foot and ankle. I only did foot and ankle privately.
Yeah, that's really interesting how those circumstances develop, and the thought process on how you do it. And like, just going back to what we were saying about for Fortius then. So with the company having been sold, and like, so how involved do you feel in that process in terms of strategy, long-term planning?
Now, well, there's a larger company, international company in there running it. I think they still ask for advice, and they listen. I hope they listen, because the systems work fairly well so far. And I think they've realised they haven't interfered too much to date. So I think they realise that it seems to work well, and there is a board of clinicians which is listened to. So it's the board has a say in the direction of where the company goes with Fortius within the larger organisation, which is Affidea. But Fortius itself still has a sort of its own, not autonomous, but it's certainly it's separate. And I think it would be silly to change that. I think they look at it, or I hope they look at it and go, well, actually, it's been doing well so far. Why change that? So we'll see how things evolve over the next 1 or 2 years. But if I was looking at it from outside, I'd go, well, it's working pretty well. Keep doing the same thing and enlarge. The difficulty, obviously, you don't want to enlarge. You don't want to get too big, because otherwise you start fragmenting. And I think that's always the danger. And we've been able to keep a very close cohort of people together, and make them feel loved.
Yeah, that must be quite interesting then. So what was it like going through that process of when it was happening?
What, the sale?
Yeah, the sale.
Uh, I think in two minds. We didn't want to, there were different ways you could do this. You could either expand and get big venture capitalists in to come and to expand up, but just didn't really sound like that was going to work terribly well. But we did worry about whether we were going to be able to carry on working in the same environment and have some say in what we're doing, because the concern is obviously then it just comes about money. And if you've got a company coming in just wanting to make money, then they'll cut the things that perhaps that make the pursuit of excellence a reality. And as I said before, if we just continue along the lines of pursuing excellence, then the money tends to follow. It may not follow in the same at the same speed that a banker may want, but it tends to follow, and it gives you a steady income. So I think that was our worry, and that's why we went with who we'd got going then. And in fact, we were due to be bought in April 2020, and of course, the world fell apart a couple of weeks before that. So that never happened. But interestingly, they came back to us at the end of the year and said, actually, do you still want to sell? And we went, well, yes. So that's encouraging. But and obviously, when during COVID, obviously things didn't, we couldn't do very much during that time. So it was but we picked up very quickly afterwards.
Yeah, and then you had some involvement in COVID in terms of the structural organisation, I believe.
Yeah. So though I worked in London as soon as COVID started, I was clinical director of the Nightingale Hospital for Rightly or Wrongly, which was an interesting place to set up. I think it was, it wasn't, thankfully wasn't used, but there were some very, big structural problems to try and get over in setting that up. But I was there with some of my ex-army colleagues and things like this who were absolutely superb in just seeing this is a problem. We've got to get a solution. And looking at two big warehouses a kilometre long, and saying you want 1,400 bed ITU, ventilated ITU. That's and you're asking an orthopedic surgeon. Well, that's a bit difficult. But there's a guy, Eddie Challoner, who knew from the Paras, who was there, and he said, well, actually, James, there's a roof, there's lighting, electricity, water, and no one's shooting at us. So actually, it's not impossible, is it? So the army came into and really pushed it out. There could have been other ways it had been done, but at the same time, there was a question of whether we could open sports. And so I've been talking to Colin Moynihan, who used to be the Minister of Sport years ago in the probably in the 80s, and he said, look, could we not get sport going in some guys, horse racing, at least that makes money for the exchequer as well with the betting. And also, if I have to see another 1994 FA Cup final, we're all in a bad place mentally anyway, but we need to get some sport out there. So he said, well, okay. And DCMS came and said, well, can you do it? So there was a group of amazing chief medical officers from various different sports, from all the different sports. And although I was sort of independent chair, if you like, it was the chief medical officers from England rugby, from cricket, FA, everybody, all the different horse racings, athletics, everything came together so that we could get all the sports going at once. So there wasn't just one team, because Premier League obviously have the money, and they were destined to lose the most enormous amount of money, but they probably wouldn't go under. Whereas rugby league is on a knife edge at the best of times, and actually sit there and go, well, actually, we've got to get everything going so we can get rugby league going again, as well as all the other sports. And they were the CMOs were brilliant about talking with DCMS, with Jonathan Van Tam, who was excellent, to open it up. And we opened the sports up, and then we opened up then separately I was asked to get involved with the opening of the theatres and the libraries and the museums, and the theatres was much more difficult because of the singing and the musical instruments. And that's where they said, well, actually you can't, James, allow singing because you have to be 6 meters apart to sing, according to some papers out of Germany. And I said, well, where's the papers? And they went, well, no, we're not going to allow it. And you've got to play a musical instrument, you've got to be 3 meters apart for a wind instrument or a brass instrument. And I said, well, I'm no trumpeter, but when you blow on a trumpet, if you blow it on a candle, the candle doesn't move. It's this bit that's vibrating that causes it. So I don't think there's a big aerobiology. But they said, well, quite rightly. So he said, well, to open it up, you've got to prove it. So we then opened up our orthopedic theatres at Fortius, and we got the aerobiology lab from Bristol and brought it up to Fortius theatres, where they've got the clean air theatres. And we did a load of experiments with the London Philharmonic Orchestra came in with their woodwind instruments and brass, and we got the Royal Opera House singers in who came and sang to prove the amount of aerobiology and the droplet particles that were being produced, so that then we could use that to advise Sage on which bit sectors you could open up and at what stage and what sort of restriction you could put in to do with airflow and things like this. Something that I can't remember doing at medical school, but anyway, this was it was slightly out of my comfort zone. But anyway, the point was we got this all done, and also it was actually for gyms because we looked at it. GB rowing had a big hit with COVID right at the start, and if you're on an ergo and you're rowing away in a closed room, it's probably not going to be great if one of you's got COVID. So we did a lot on watt bikes, looking at your aerosol generation as you exercise. And it's only really when you go anaerobic that you actually really produce some fine deep droplet or fine droplets from deep down. So that meant you could then advise on opening of gyms as well in that sector, and on aircraft, whether you need to wear masks. So we did all those experiments as well. So it was a really fascinating. If you're a nerd like me, I'm afraid I'm a bit of a nerd. It was a fascinating time, and it was. I think it probably made a difference. It may be this is now in the folder, so that when next time there's a pandemic, at least the information is there that can be used to guide transport, whether you're on trains, planes, whatever, and also how you can close different sectors of society and which sectors you can keep open. That's the idea behind it. Anyway.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So you had all of that in Fortius with the Philharmonic Orchestra and like this. Yeah, that must have been quite a sight having. Were they all in there at the same time?
Yeah, we had to. No one else in Fortius was there. We just opened it up. There were theatres sort of open during the week a bit for emergencies, but they didn't really get used. But so we just opened it up on a Friday, and we did it during the night. So we had to bring people in. But there was a. If you remember, we were just about to open the grassroots cricket on a Saturday, and on the Wednesday before, the Prime Minister announced. Boris said, that the cricket ball, that well-known vector of transmission of COVID. And I was on a Zoom call with DCMS at the time, and we all just went, just head in hands moment. So we had to quickly see whether actually, because we didn't have any evidence that the cricket ball was such a dangerous thing. So I got, and if you remember then also, you couldn't, when you were playing golf, you couldn't pick another person's ball up, and you couldn't pick the flag out. Like it seemed utterly ridiculous to the scientists amongst us that you couldn't do that. It just seemed such as there are other ways of transmitting the disease. But we then took a whole load of sports kit up to the Liverpool School for Tropical Medicine, and they'd got a big COVID ward in a category 3 lab. So we did experiments on golf balls, cricket balls, rugby jerseys, footballs, horse riding saddles, crash mats for gymnastics and things like this, and infected them with COVID and then wiped them down to see how long it takes for the COVID to disappear, and it just dies pretty much instantly. So the evidence, the advice was therefore to say, look, just don't worry about it. You can share tennis balls. I mean, it's unlikely you're going to get I remember, I had tennis ball with J on it, and that was my ball. I had two balls with that, and then I wasn't going to pick up the one with the A on it because I might get COVID. And it did seem a bit far-fetched. We all got sort of wrapped up in this, but actually these experiments then showed actually, no, that's not the answer. And it actually, I think it probably gave me a paper with the biggest impact factor of anything I've ever done. Forget about the Lancet and stuff. I think there was a front page of the Daily Sport, had a picture of some chap with tennis balls hanging out of his shorts, and said, "Boffins say you can now play with your balls." So it's probably the best paper I've ever had published, I think, as a result, for several reasons. I mean, I've never been called a boffin before now, so that's but wrong, but it's it made me smile.
Now that really is fascinating to be right at the epicenter of how things, because it takes you back to, I remember going to play tennis at David Lloyd just down the road with my brother, and it was like, wow, this is incredible. So yeah, no, it brings it all back. So is that where the OBE came from then?
Yeah, probably. There's some stuff that we did around there, and I'd been obviously working with sport for a while, and I don't really know. You don't really get a citation to say thanks for coming. You just sort of get a notice saying, inviting you, would you accept it? Which you're obviously going to say yes. Check they put the right name on the front of the envelope. But no, I think it was possibly from that. It's possibly from that, and some stuff some work we did with sport along the line. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, brilliant. No, I mean, amazing achievement. So congratulations on doing that. And then, so just like finally for me then, like, what would your advice be? You've done some extensive things and, getting involved with COVID. Hopefully we don't have to go through anything like that again. But what would your advice be for people that are looking to get into the industry, whether it's in orthopedic surgery or just healthcare in general? What would your advice be?
I'd say for those who think about doing medicine, don't believe the papers. There's all sorts of terrible stuff written about doing medicine, and it's terrible for junior doctors and things. Yeah, it's tough, and the NHS is a difficult place, but it's unbelievably rewarding, and I've been very lucky, so I get that, or fortunate, whichever way you want to put it. So I think you if you're going into it to make money, forget it. But any of us years ago going into it, we've been lucky. But I think it's an incredibly rewarding thing to do. It's also not, if you're going to do medicine, yes, you may not become a doctor. You could go in the army, you could become a lawyer, you could go into pharmaceuticals, everything else. The whole world opens up. Within sports, for physiotherapy and for allied health professionals, nutritionists, psychologists, that is becoming a hugely demanding and increasingly important job, where there's a lot more work between individuals. So professions were very separate in the past. Now I think you'll probably see this, Andy, that people are coming together a lot more, and actually it's a multidisciplinary approach to getting an athlete back. And there's a slide I showed at the Arsenal at the Smug saying that actually when you look at your Venn diagram of how people get back, athletes get back, there's a little tiny bit here, and that little tiny segment is the surgery, because I think the surgeon is a very, very small part of it. The other part is to do with the rehab, it's to do with the genetics initially, it's to do with the nutrition, the psychology, and that's we're only beginning to touch on that now, and it's great that I think that in the UK, I'm very patriotic, so you'll forgive me, but I think we are the leaders in it. It used to be 25 years ago, we used to go to Australia because they got it. They really got it. The rehab, the physios, all the physios in the UK were Australian. Some of them are still, but they really got it. But interestingly, they're now coming over to here because they realise this is an area where we've got loads of sport over here. It's not just in the States, but I think we do it as a team here very, very easily. So for those people who are going into it, enjoy it. I think it's a great opportunity. Really is.
Brilliant. No, that's a great way to finish, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights and what you've gone through, which is quite a unique. Everyone's career is unique, but you've done some quite incredible things. So thank you very much for sharing. I really appreciate it.
That's all. Well, it's I've been supported by friends. That's the key thing. I may not be good at some things, but I've been good at choosing my friends.
That's good advice for anyone in any profession. So it's great. Look, James, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Cheers.